Last year I went to southeast India to fish for Mahseer on the River Cauvery, and quite a number of people have asked me about it. Unfortunately I didn't have the video camera then, and I only have still photographs of it. So using these still photographs, I'll video them and make a little commentary about each one and my experiences whilst I was there. Obviously the quality won't be, certainly won't be HD, but that's by and by. Anyway, I hope you find it interesting. It's a different experience. I mean, Mahseer are just like giant barbel really, and the methods used to catch them are very, very similar. Anyway, see what you make of it. So this is our intrepid group. We all met up at Heathrow Airport and flew to Bangalore in India. I went with Angling Travel, and we were led by John Bailey, spread eagled at the front of this photograph. And when we got to Bangalore, we had 2 jeeps to take us all the way to Galibore fishing camp, which was about 4 hours away. It was an absolutely hair-raising ride, especially through Bangalore. The traffic was just indescribable. You couldn't possibly have done it on your own. And halfway through the journey we stopped at a little place called Kanakapura, and toilets, quite clean toilets, and hot sweet tea, very, very welcome. The roads were very, very good for most part, and 1 or 2 places, particularly this place here, the centre of the town, was really rough. A real bone-shaking journey through here. You know you're in India when you see these bicycles. There must be millions of them. They're gradually disappearing, slowly. Look at that saddle. Amazing. They all have this little rest. And the writing on the chain guard is advertisement. I don't know what he did, what his business is, but he's obviously carrying things. They also have that little spring-loaded carrier on the back. One day there'll be a valuable antique, but for the moment they're absolutely everywhere, and they have no gears, and they're quite highly geared, so they're very, very, very difficult to pedal. But the other thing you see in India, of course, are their ambassador car, which they still make in India, which is based on the Morris Oxford, the old Morris Oxford. And it's still going very, very strong, although as India becomes richer you see far more Japanese and German motor cars now. One of the things I noticed as we were travelling along was masses of millet, freshly cut, spread-eagled all over the road, and we just ploughed our way through it in these jeeps, which I thought was very, very odd. Anyway, it was explained to me that they put the millet on the road when it's ripened, and as the traffic passes over it, it threshes it, separates it from its grain. So when 3 or 4 vehicles have gone past, they collect all the grain up and leave the rest for more vehicles to pass through. So they'll be eating millet grain mixed with all sorts of things which have dropped from vehicles. And eventually we left the tarmac roads and turned down this little track, which I thought would be for a short journey, but it turned out to be 9 kilometres into the Cauvery Valley. This was, I suspect it was National Park, because there was no people living here at all. And up to that point the roads had been incredibly busy, passing through many villages with people dressed in the most amazing colours and fantastic markets which they had, but an awful lot of poverty, which you expect when you visit underdeveloped countries. But the people seem very happy with their lives. Women seem to have to do an awful lot of the work, I have to say. So after a real tooth-loosening journey down this track, they certainly didn't let up on the speed. We eventually arrived at the camp, Galibore camp, and this is the accommodation. So they have these permanent shelters, and underneath them they have a large tent, at the back of which are the ablutions. You can see the tent there is raised up on a big concrete ramp, and they were very pleasant inside. There you get a better idea of the tent arrangement, how it's held with these little ropes, and that concrete block at the back is where the ablutions are, and you can get to it through a door in the back of the tent. So this was inside the tent, simply furnished, and no air conditioning, of course, great big fan. The nice thing about going in the second week of January was the temperature was absolutely wonderful in the middle of an English winter. In fact, the days were decidedly hot, but the evenings were beautiful. And very little evidence at that time of year of mosquitoes, although you were advised to take precautions against mosquito bites. None of the tents had mosquito nets on the beds, so if you were at all worried about it, you could take one yourself and decide whether to use it or not. But I did notice inside the staff quarters where the guides lived that all their beds had mosquito nets, bearing in mind that they're there all the year, they're not just there during the dry season. So these were the ablutions. Usual sink, tap on the wall there, and the shower was simply a pipe poking out the wall, but it didn't have a shower head on, but it was very welcome when you'd been out all day in the hot sun. The water was quite warm when it came out, but if you wanted hot water you had to order it, and it came in a bucket the following morning, or you had to order it in the morning if you wanted hot water in the afternoon, and it was absolutely scalding hot. So you had to be really careful with this bucket of water on the floor. And this was the water heater, the source of all the hot water, and as I say, it was absolutely scalding hot. So you had to mix it 50-50 with cold water before you could even use it. And you had the flush toilet, much to my amazement. Where it flushed to, I haven't a clue. I didn't inquire, but most unexpected and very welcome. There's something about squat plates which I'm not very happy about. Albeit not very much, but there was enough to charge the telephone or charge the batteries on the cameras. But the lighting was provided by these oil lamps powered by diesel. This was the chap who looked after them. So every evening he put all these oil lamps out throughout the camp, and very nice it was. And then in the morning he came around and collected them all and filled them all up with diesel again. A very cheerful chap he was, very pleasant. I used to see this old chap around the camp. He didn't speak a word of English, but he was a very pleasant fella, and we tried to communicate one with the other. He was obviously at the very bottom of the pecking order. He got all the dirty jobs to do, sweeping up, descaling fish, sorting out toilets and one thing and another. And he didn't sleep with the others either. He was obviously lower caste perhaps, and he slept outside. But he was happy to show me where he slept, and he seemed a very, very happy man, which made me feel quite humble considering what he had to do. I suppose he was thankful that he had somewhere to stay and jobs to do. Nevertheless, it was a very, very hard life for somebody as elderly as he was. But a very, very nice chap. And this was all he had, this bed, which he took me to show me. And that was where he slept, outside the main quarters for the guides. And this is where the guide stayed. As you can see there, mosquito nets on all the beds. One of the guides took me up to show me quite proudly where he slept. It was a very male-orientated environment. I don't recollect seeing a woman around the place anywhere. I think there were one or two lived somewhere around who maybe did the laundry or looked after the chickens. But for the most part it was very, very male orientated. And some of the guys were married, but their wives lived a long, long way away. And they were paid about $30 a month, US. And we're very, very happy to have it. My guide thought it was a very, very good job he had. But it was just one of those things to bear in mind when it came to tipping at the end. How much you were giving them. This is the go-car, which was where we ate in the mornings and evenings, and where we met up at lunchtime when the sun was too hot for fishing. And very, very pleasant. Open air, and a great place to spend the evening talking about who had failed, who had succeeded, and getting to know people from all over the world who were at the camp. Although our group had a sizable chunk of it, there were people there from elsewhere. And this was a typical meal. The food was very good by and large. This was chicken, but we got goat's meat, occasionally seafood occasionally. The person who did the meat obviously just chopped it up with a meat cleaver. There was bone splinters and all sorts in it. I think I would give it some maniac to do. But we had rice, and in the morning it was mainly sausages, bacon and egg, which you ordered, and they did the eggs there, and or tea, and tea and coffee were also served. So the food was very, very nice, very, very pleasant. Nothing spectacular, but you know, we were in the middle of nowhere. And the other thing, of course, was they had a big freezer. It was full of beer, Indian beer, Kingfisher beer, lovely stuff. And of course, more than welcome after a morning session in the sun or an afternoon session in the sun. It really was a delight. Lovely stuff. And there was wine. I mean, I'm not a wine connoisseur, but those who laid claim to being wine connoisseurs, they felt that it was undrinkable. And if you were a drinking person, there was obviously spirits there as well. When it came to the drink, they kept a tab, so there was no, you didn't pay for it at the time. And at the end of the day, they added it all up. And our bill came to what seemed to be an exorbitant figure for our tent, because neither of us were big drinkers. So if you go, it might pay to keep your own tab and make it pretty obvious that you are keeping it, because I'm sure there was some shenanigans going on before we left. With it being in the middle of some national park, there was some amazing wildlife. Eagles, cormorants, mongoose, leopard, crocodiles, wild elephants, you name it. But the camp was inhabited by a troop of these things. These are called macaques, and they were into everything. If they got inside your tent, they'd wreck it. So you had to make sure that your tent was locked up before you went away, because they could move, slide bolts backwards and forwards. And as soon as your back was turned, they were down out of the trees and fighting over whatever was left behind. But they weren't things to be messed about with, as you can see by those teeth. Fortunately, they were terrified of humans, and they kept well out of the way. However, just in case they got a little bit close, or just in case they were causing a nuisance around the tents, this somewhat powerful air gun was hanging there to let them know who was boss. But from my point of view, they were no bother at all. In fact, I don't think they bothered any of us. But it was interesting to watch their antics. And this was our first view of the Cauvery from the camp. This was the beach, and you could fish for Mahseer from here at lunchtime if you wished, rather than hide from the sun. And there were thousands of small Mahseer in here, very easy to catch. You could catch 10 quite easily in half an hour or even less. But there were some big Mahseer in here as well. So if you were fishing lightweight gear and you got a 30-pound Mahseer on, you certainly knew about it. It was off, and that was it. And you can see the coracles lying on the beach there as well. It was very, very pleasant to sit there. Very, very nice. A wonderful way to spend an English winter.